You were told the teachings of Jesus were safely preserved in a single sacred book, complete, closed, beyond question. They told you that nothing essential was left out, nothing hidden, nothing forgotten. They told you that Mary Magdalene was only a devoted follower, a quiet witness, a secondary figure standing behind louder voices and stronger names. They told you the story was finished, defined, settled, and yet something in you has always sensed that this was not the full story, that behind the polished surface there was a deeper current moving beneath the veil. Some truths are not erased by time or buried by authority. They simply wait until you are ready to see them. They return softly, like a whisper rising through the noise of conditioning and illusion, subtle but impossible to ignore once heard. The Gospel of Mary is one of those whispers, not a new religion, not a rebellion, but a remembrance breaking through the silence. This is not belief asking for your loyalty. This is not doctrine demanding your obedience. It is a map hidden in plain sight, a guide to the ascent of the soul beyond fear, beyond identity, beyond the stories you were handed about who you are. It does not ask you to become something else. It invites you to uncover what has always been there, waiting beneath the surface of your life, something you remember. There are moments in a lifetime when something ancient feels closer, as if a truth older than your name is waiting just behind your thoughts. And this is one of those moments, because what we are about to step into is not a new belief, and not a rebellion against anything you were taught, but a memory that may have been sleeping inside you long before this life began, a memory that whispers that the story you inherited about faith, authority, and salvation was never the whole story, only one layer of it, only one voice among many that once existed. The Gospel of Mary does not stand as a tale about a woman beside a man, nor as an argument about history, but as a mirror held before the soul itself, a reminder that beneath conditioning, beneath identity, beneath the roles you have played and the fears you have carried, there is something luminous that has not changed, something untouched by time, something that has been waiting quietly for you to notice it again. This teaching cannot be forced and cannot be argued into existence. It unfolds only when something inside you is ready to question the surface of things, when you begin to sense that salvation might not be about obedience or ritual or external approval, but about awakening, about direct knowing, about remembering what was once obvious before the world convinced you otherwise. After the death of Jesus, history did not move forward in a single straight line. There was not one unified Christianity, but many communities, many interpretations, many understandings of what had truly been spoken and embodied, some choosing the outer structure where morality and order slowly hardened into hierarchy and authority, where guidance gradually shifted toward control, and others walking a quieter path rooted in lived inner experience. In the awakening of the soul through direct encounter rather than inherited doctrine, these streams eventually collided, and those who emphasized faith defined by obedience and institutional power rose into dominance, shaping the version of the story that became familiar to the world. Yet beneath that surface, another current endured. A living flame passed hand to hand, whispered in small gatherings, preserved in fragments, visions, and texts of revelation. These early followers were later called Gnostics, not as a badge of rebellion, but as a reflection of their conviction that liberation arises not from belief in external authority, but from awakening knowledge already present within the soul. And within that current, Mary Magdalene was not a background figure, but a central presence, described as one who understood not merely through intellect, but through direct inner realization, who grasped the journey of the soul beyond body, beyond death, beyond the visible architecture of the material world. When she shared what she had received, the reaction was not quiet agreement, but disturbance, especially from Peter, who questioned her legitimacy and demanded proof, struggling to accept that authority might arise from inner revelation rather than established order. And Levi's response echoed beyond that moment. If the Savior deemed her worthy, who are you to deny it? This was not simply a disagreement among disciples, it was a clash between two visions of reality, one anchored in external hierarchy, and the other rooted in direct experience of the divine within. The Gospel of Mary was not absorbed into the later canon, surviving only in fragments, perhaps because its emphasis on inner transformation and the soul's direct relationship to the divine shifted spiritual authority away from institutions and into the depths of individual consciousness. It suggested that the kingdom is not reached by traveling outward, but discovered by descending inward, and that subtle shift unsettled structures built on mediation and control. If the path to the divine begins within the soul, then the role of external intermediaries changes, and that possibility alone was enough to reshape the ground beneath established belief. This is why those fragments endured, and why they return now, not as a demand but as an invitation. Perhaps because you are at a point in your own life where you can feel the cracks in the story you were given, where you sense that what you have been striving toward may not be the destination after all. The text begins not with commandments, but with a question. Not what must we do to be saved, but what is it that binds the soul? And in that question something shifts, because it assumes you are not fundamentally broken, but temporarily entangled, not condemned, but distracted. Mary speaks of the soul as originally pure and luminous, entering into layers of experience shaped by mind and emotion, encountering forces that pull it toward forgetfulness, not demons in a literal sense, but inner currents such as desire, ignorance, pride, confusion, and the false ruler of the mind that insists on separation. These are not sins to be punished, but states of identification that arise when the temporary is mistaken for the eternal, when thoughts, fears, and personal history are mistaken for identity itself. The soul's journey is not postponed until death. It unfolds now in every moment you choose to see beyond illusion. And when that choice begins, something in you recognizes that this story is not distant or abstract, but intimately personal, as if it has been describing you all along. It feels less like learning a new story and more like remembering one you've been living without realizing it, because the moment the soul begins to remember, it does not ascend in triumph. It encounters resistance, and this is where Mary's vision becomes deeply personal, for she describes the ascent not as a dramatic escape, but as a confrontation with the very forces that once defined you. The soul rises and desire speaks first, not as a monster, but as a familiar voice saying, "Where are you going? You belong to me." And you can feel how accurate that sounds when you think of the cravings, ambitions, attachments, and anxieties that have shaped your decisions, how easily they convince you that without them you would be nothing. Yet in Mary's telling, the soul does not fight or suppress desire. It responds with recognition. "I saw you, and you did not see me. I was never truly yours." And in that exchange, something subtle but irreversible occurs, because desire loses its grip the moment it is seen clearly rather than obeyed blindly. This is the first gate, not conquered by force but passed through by awareness, and you may recognize it in your own life. Whenever you pause in the middle of an impulse and realize you are the one witnessing it, not the impulse itself. Then comes ignorance, the quieter but more pervasive force that whispers, "You are small, you are limited, you are only this body, this biography, this fragile identity moving toward death." And if you listen carefully, you can hear how often that voice has shaped your sense of self. Again, the soul answers, not with argument, but with remembrance. "You did not know me, you clothed me in fear, yet I am from the realm of fullness. And here the second gate opens, because ignorance cannot withstand the steady recognition of a presence that existed before the story you call me. Finally, the soul encounters what Mary calls the false ruler, the inner construct that insists separation is real, that you are cut off from the source, that divinity is elsewhere and must be reached through effort or approval. And this is the most subtle veil, because it hides behind spiritual striving itself. Liberation in Mary's vision does not come through belief in a doctrine, but through remembering origin, through the realization, I was never separate. I am not this fleeting form. I am not confined to this narrative of fear and achievement. I am awareness itself. This is the core of the Ascent, and it overturns the assumption that growth means climbing higher toward something outside you, for the movement is inward, into the center of being where awareness rests quietly beneath thought. The gates are not stationed in a distant afterlife, but unfolding in your daily reactions, your emotional storms, your silent judgments, each moment offering an opportunity to step back and see rather than be swept away. Once you begin to perceive life through this lens, the world transforms from a prison into a labyrinth seen from above, and what once felt like chaos begins to reveal pattern. Mary's insight extends further, reframing the world itself not as a punishment or mistake, but as a field of training for remembrance, a place where the soul sharpens its clarity through contrast, where forces that seem to pull you downward exist not to destroy you, but to expose where you still believe you are separate. In her account, Jesus speaks of the material world arising from a rupture in awareness, a forgetting that generated the illusion of division, and when the soul enters physical existence, it absorbs that illusion. Identifying with the body, the egoic mind, the name, the past, and the emotions that fluctuate from hour to hour, this forgetting becomes the first veil, and what later traditions called sin is recast as simple amnesia, the belief that you are other than what you are. If separation is the root illusion, then nothing needs to be forgiven in the sense of moral stain, because the essence of the soul was never damaged, only obscured. Life then becomes the gradual lifting of that veil from within, not by rejecting the world, but by seeing through it, understanding that everything you fear, crave, resist, or cling to acts as a mirror reflecting where you have identified with the temporary. This perspective clarifies why the disciples struggled with Mary's message. For many sought certainty in external rules and visible authority, hoping salvation would arrive from outside through allegiance to a figure or structure, while Mary perceived that if the soul originates in the divine, the return must unfold within the soul itself. That shift relocates authority from hierarchy to inner experience, and you can feel how destabilizing that might have been in a community seeking order. Yet it also carries a quiet empowerment, suggesting that the path does not require exile from the world, but a deeper intimacy with your own awareness. When the soul awakens, Mary says, it remembers three movements. I came from fullness. I entered forgetfulness. I return through knowing myself. This knowing is not intellectual accumulation, but direct perception, a clarity that cannot be handed down because it arises within. And perhaps the reason these teachings survived in fragments is that they were never meant to dominate history, but to reach individuals at precise moments of readiness. Moments like this one, when you sense that what has been described is not merely ancient myth, but an outline of your own inner landscape, waiting to be recognized. Waiting to be recognized, because recognition is where this teaching stops being a story about ancient disciples and becomes a mirror held directly in front of you, and this is where everything turns inward. Most people move through life fused with their thoughts, carried by impulses, reacting before they ever notice what is moving them. And if you are honest, you can see how often your days unfold inside that automatic current, how quickly desire rises and you follow it, how swiftly fear appears and you become it, how easily judgment speaks and you mistake it for truth. Mary's instruction is almost disarmingly simple, and perhaps that is why it feels so radical. Notice the one who is aware, not the thought, not the emotion, not the role you are playing, but the quiet presence that observes all of it. This is where the ascent begins, not in grand visions or dramatic revelations, but in the smallest and most overlooked space, the space between you and your thoughts. When desire pulls, pause and notice it. When fear tightens your chest, notice it. When pride swells or shame contracts, notice it. Not to suppress or fight, but simply to see clearly, because illusion draws its strength from identification. And the moment you see a thought as something appearing within awareness rather than as your identity, a gap opens. In that gap there is space, and in that space there is clarity. And in that clarity there is a subtle but unmistakable shift that feels like coming home. Mary does not instruct you to become someone new. She points you toward what has never changed. The presence, that has been here before every memory, before every belief you adopted, before every label you learned to answer to. Your body has changed, your opinions have shifted, your relationships have formed and dissolved, your emotions rise and fall like weather, yet something in you has remained constant, silently witnessing the entire movement. That constancy is what she calls the soul, not as an abstract doctrine but as lived awareness. The ascent happens each time you step back from identification and rest as that presence. Each time you remember that you are the one who perceives fear rather than fear itself, the one who observes anger rather than anger, the one who sees the narrative of your life rather than being confined to it. And this is not an escape from the world, but a deeper participation in it. Because when you no longer cling to every passing thought as identity, your actions begin to arise from clarity rather than compulsion. The world becomes a teacher rather than an enemy, reflecting the places where you still believe you are separate, inviting you to look more closely. Mary's teaching suggests that you do not need monasteries, gurus, or withdrawal from society to begin, because the practice unfolds in ordinary moments, while you sit quietly and feel your breath, while you watch thoughts appear and dissolve, while you ask gently, who is aware of this moment? Do not answer with analysis. Do not construct a definition. Simply feel the fact of awareness itself. That awareness did not begin this morning. It was present before your earliest memory, and it has not been altered by success or failure. When emotion arises, you have a choice rarely pointed out to you. Instead of merging with it, you can observe it. You can breathe and recognize, this is an experience occurring within me, not the entirety of what I am. That recognition alone loosens the knot. The forces Mary described as desire, ignorance, pride, and confusion become thresholds rather than enemies, revealing where attention has drifted into identification. And the more often you return to the witnessing presence, the more natural it feels, as though you are remembering a skill you once had but forgot to use. Many imagine awakening as lightning splitting the sky, as visions or ecstasy, and while such moments may occur, more often awakening is quiet. A widening of space in the mind, a softening of reactivity, a steady sense of being anchored in something deeper than circumstance. It feels less like acquiring something and more like removing what was covering it. And as that removal continues, an unexpected empowerment arises, not the loud empowerment of ego, but the grounded certainty that you are not separate from the source you once sought. The idea that you were a being reaching upward toward divinity slowly dissolves into the recognition that divinity was the awareness looking through your eyes all along. This is the reversal at the heart of Mary's message. the turning of perspective from outside to inside, from striving to remembering. When that shift stabilizes, even briefly, you begin to see how much of your life was shaped by the belief that you were incomplete, and how much freedom opens when that belief loosens. The ascent is not a ladder into the sky, but a return of awareness to its own depth. Right now, as these words move through you, awareness is already present, already witnessing the sensations in your body, the thoughts forming in response, the subtle emotions stirred by recognition. You do not need to create it, you only need to notice it. And perhaps this is the quiet revolution Mary carried, not a rebellion against faith, but a relocation of authority into direct experience. An invitation to see that the path to what you call God begins within the simple act of knowing yourself. If something in you feels stirred, familiar, almost intimate, it may not be new information but an old memory surfacing, the sense that you have always known the way but forgot to look where it begins. The soul was never truly lost, it only dreamed it had forgotten. And in recognizing that, you step into a moment that feels both ordinary and immense, as if history, myth, and your own inner life have converged into a single quiet realization that cannot be forced or argued, only experienced, here, now, in the awareness that has been with you all along. If something in this journey felt quietly familiar, as though a door inside you opened without force, then perhaps what you experienced was not persuasion, but recognition. Nothing here asked you to adopt a new belief or abandon an old one. It simply held a mirror to something that may have always been present beneath the surface of your thoughts. The Gospel of Mary was never merely a forgotten text. It was a gentle reminder that what you seek has never been far from you. If, while listening, you sensed a subtle stirring, a softness behind your usual reactions, or a widening space in your awareness, that is not random. It does not mean you are late, or lost, or behind in your path. It may simply mean you are exactly where you are meant to be in this season of your life. The world often trains you to chase meaning outward, to measure yourself by achievement, certainty, or approval. Yet what you have just moved through points inward, toward the quiet center that has been watching your entire story unfold. Desire, fear, doubt, confusion, none of them stand as enemies. They appear as reflections, showing you where attention has tightened and where it can gently soften again. Each moment you noticed awareness instead of becoming lost inside reaction, something real shifted, even if only slightly. That shift does not need to be dramatic to be true. The ascent Mary described was never reserved for the extraordinary. It unfolds in the ordinary rhythm of your own consciousness. The movement is not upward into something new, but inward into something that has always been here, something timeless that has never abandoned you. If this teaching resonated in even the smallest way, that resonance is meaningful. It suggests that what survived in fragments across centuries continues because it is recognized, not imposed. The soul was never truly separated. It only moved through layers of forgetfulness, and layers can thin quietly without spectacle. You are not walking this process alone, and you are not being rushed. The awareness that has been present through every chapter of your life remains here now, calm and unchanged. And if you wish to continue exploring these hidden threads of remembrance, there are more paths ahead that unfold gently from here. As I sit with everything we have just moved through, what lingers for me is not an argument about history, not a debate about doctrine, but a quiet sense that something long buried is gently breathing again. The story of Mary, as it has come down in fragments, feels less like a forgotten chapter of religion and more like a mirror placed in front of our own inner lives. It does not demand agreement. It does not insist on belief. It simply opens a space where you might notice the presence that has always been here, watching, waiting, steady beneath the noise. And I can't help but wonder what this stirred in you. Did any part of it feel strangely familiar, as if you had heard it before without remembering when? Did it challenge something you have always assumed about yourself, about faith, about where authority truly rests? Or did it feel like a quiet reassurance, confirming something you have sensed but never had language for? I would genuinely love to hear what surfaced for you while listening. If one sentence could capture what this journey awakened inside you, what would it be? You might share a word, a feeling, or even a question that is still unfolding. Your reflections help keep this conversation alive, not as a conclusion, but as an ongoing exploration. And if this perspective resonated with you, if it felt like a doorway rather than a wall, you can gently let that be known by liking this video and staying connected for the next steps in this unfolding path. Sometimes a simple gesture of engagement becomes a way of honoring what moved within you.